Okay, so we are on week 13 of 15. So we have 14, 15 after this week. This is Introduction to Networks, April 13th. We're going to start having a password on Zoom, NIAC 2020 exclamation point. They checked to see if they could telnet to this address. We use then that later on to do some network discovery. I started out, we talked about the application layer in the TCP/IP model and how users then, they have apps or applications that link into this networking model, right? Application, transport layer, and then so forth. We talked about the OSI layer a little bit, presentation session layers, and the application layer all make up the application layer in the TCP/IP model. So we mentioned some protocols: file transfer protocol, hypertext transfer protocol, simple mail transfer protocol, domain name services, trivial FTP. This is a UDP, doesn't check. These three, they're all TCP. They're going to make sure everything gets sent. You know, you set up a session, and the session won't end until it has everything. It sets up those sequencing numbers and so forth. You can see the three-way handshake. So at the transport layer, talking about these two. Now on the mail, I mentioned this sends the mail. To get it off the server, you either use POP or IMAP. More on that on Wednesday. Then for the transport layer, we also talked about multiple separate communications. You can be, as an example, you can be downloading a file and browsing the internet and, you know, I don't know, even sending email. And the way it keeps track of those communications are via sockets. Take an IP and link it to a port number. And we have source and destination addresses. Then we talked about secure socket layer, transport socket layer. More on this later when we talk about security. A lot more when we talk about security this summer. TCP connection. Okay, we have a client, you have a browser, you're going to connect to a web server. It's going to do this three-way handshake. I'm not going to go through all the steps, but I'll do that three-way handshake. Make sure we have connections to the server, then it'll make sure all the packets are sent, and it'll manage how many packets it sends before rechecking by looking at those sequence numbers. So you think about it, we have the data. The transport layer is how the data is going to be transported. Create a segment. So that segment goes down here, and then we add an IP address to that. Create a packet. So it's encapsulation. That can move down. And then we add the data link layer. So if it's Ethernet and a switch, it'd be MAC addressing. So we encapsulate it again. It goes out on the wire. Then when it comes back, it's just a reverse process, and it goes back up here, connects to your application. Dropbox, we're still experimenting, dropping in images during class. these images. Network security. We talk about data. Data at rest, data in transit, data being processed. And then we need to classify that data. You know, how secure does one piece of data have to be over others? So we classify it, and then we can segment our network and manage the traffic east and west. That's within our network. And then coming in and out of our networks, north and south. Traffic going to another network or the internet. I mentioned how we telnet between devices right now, and starting Wednesday we're going to start setting up secured shell, more or less encrypting the message as it moves between the devices. Okay, so that'll be our first step, securing devices. We also talked about peer-to-peer networks, and we're going to spend more time on those on Wednesday. So leading up to Wednesday, we've got the application layer. You want to finish that. I know we went through it quick, and we'll get started on network security, and we'll wrap network security up next week and start building a small network next week and wrap that up the last week. Now the last thing we did was people connected into router 12. Okay. So they're connected into a router. Everybody's connected into a router, and then from that router you had to discover, look for things around the network. So you had to use the information you had from this router and then my clues, which most students considered very vague or ambiguous. So we connected in from the DMZ switch, you know, the 172.21.0.0/16, that network. We came in here, and now there's devices down here, and in those devices are, I call it Easter egg hunt. There are things to find that have to do with Easter. So you have to use the hint and look for that information. Using what? Using ICMP, and then your understanding of addressing. ETC. That is it.